I want to take a moment and thank Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey for sponsoring this podcast, Jewish, where everyone belongs. Welcome to Jewish, where everyone belongs. I think you all know we're brought to you by Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. So as such, it made sense to me that we bring on the Chief Executive Officer, Jason Shamus. Jason, welcome.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here.
How many times a day do you think we talk?
We text probably on the hour, and we probably speak twice a day.
That's pretty good. So for those, I think most of you are aware, I currently chair Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. I have a very short time left, and July 1st, Andrew Kent, the chair-elect, will become chair, and you will be texting with Andrew every hour.
Well, wait a second. A lot of our texts are you, me, and Andrew, and those don't really
That's true.
Go away, and
Actually,
even include your predecessors, yeah.
That's very interesting. So I actually don't think we ever text directly. You've always got other people. You need a buffer with me. Is that true?
No, we text quite a bit one-on-one as well.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things going on where it operates as a group partnership and group leadership, which is kind of one of the cool things I think about your job and mine.
No, it's amazing. And we'll get into the dynamic and let everybody into the inner workings of Jewish Federation leadership. And we're so blessed to have such an engaged board, such an engaged group of community members. But I really wanted to start with your view sitting here of the state of the Jewish community here in New Jersey and in North America.
So I think there's a couple of different layers and answers to that for sure. In Northern New Jersey, I think we live a little bit more in a bubble. You know, sometimes I call it the Bergen bubble, even though we include Hudson County and Wayne, just because of the sheer demographics of it. But we're very susceptible to what's going on elsewhere in the Jewish community. So when something happens 6 miles east of us here in New York City, we feel it here as well. So I think on the whole, it's not a great picture what's going on. You saw the report on college antisemitism yesterday. That was horrible. But incidents specifically in Northern New Jersey are higher than they have been historically, just they don't correlate to what you might see in New York. But it doesn't mean we don't feel it, we don't witness it, and we're not a part of it.
So you feel like it's better here than it may be elsewhere, but it's still not good.
Yeah, I think we have an incredible amount of support from elected officials and law enforcement in New Jersey. Just last week, the new attorney general, the state attorney general, came to meet with our leadership here to hear about our concerns, to tell us about her initial future plans and things like that. The governor called me immediately after the event in Detroit last week. So it's a different environment in that sense. Unfortunately, that doesn't prevent lunatics from calling synagogues or institutions and threatening them or doing drive-by and harassments on the street in places like Teaneck.
Yeah, I mean, I think myself and I think many others have deep-seated and maybe reasonable concerns about security right now. And you mentioned the incident in Teaneck where, am I right, it was a visibly Jewish person was shot with a BB gun.
So there were 3 people who were shot with gel pellet guns, just not something I had ever heard of before. These were 3 minors, 17 years old, who came from Passaic County, specifically Patterson and Clifton, driving around the streets. When they saw a Jewish person walking, they yell out their window, Israel or Palestine. The person is startled, obviously, and they start shooting them with a gel pellet gun. In one case, a 19-year-old man was shot, I think, 10 times with this gun.
But everyone's okay.
They're okay. These are not like live bullets. They're not even rubber bullets, but it's still scary. It's still an act of violence, and it's still specifically targeting a visibly Jewish person in the street. And we need to have zero tolerance for it.
So when, I look at since the beginning of the Iran war, and the incidents of terrorism that have occurred in the U.S. You brought up to me yesterday, not just the U.S., Toronto, specific anti-Semitic incidents. It's a very scary period, but I appreciate you have a very steady approach to it. Is that, I mean, how do you think about like what we're living in? It seems like terrible.
It is. It's horrible and it's maddening. The reason why I'm consistent about it is because as a perceived leader and really an actual leader, let's just call it what it is, I want to make sure that we have the right processes, protocols, and procedures on security. And those trainings that save lives in Bloomington, we put in place here. And I want to make sure we have the relationships and connections with law enforcement and elected officials, and that we're doing the target hardening and those things. So I'm also privy to a lot of information that the mainstream Jewish community does not often get. It doesn't mean I don't fear it. It doesn't mean I don't see the potential for something. And people forget in northern New Jersey, we've had 2 real expressive violent incidents towards Jews in the last 15 years. In 2011, before the Tree of Life, we had fire bombings of 4 synagogues, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. And then just 5 years ago in Jersey City, we had 2 people kill a police officer in a cemetery and then go to the one kosher market in this neighborhood and kill 3 more people. So I kind of have to balance the mainstream media and social media effect on people's psychology towards security with the work that we're doing and what we can prevent. Mm-hmm. The problem that we all have, and it's not a Jewish issue, it's a national issue, is it's very hard to know exactly when and where something's going to happen.
Well, and I've heard, one of the Jewish Federations of North America's spin out groups, I'm not even going to name it, but is let's just say a security group that really monitors nationally and globally security. They describe finding active threats as finding a needle in a needle stack, not even in a haystack, but it's so hard to find. But just going back to your point, and of course you are really one of the key leaders in the state of New Jersey, and we thank you for your leadership. And I appreciate your kind of steady leadership and thought. And I also know that you know what's going on. And if you look at the law enforcement and our elected leadership, I get the sense your feeling is that we have a very strong relationship, and B, that there's a high level of support for protecting the Jewish community.
100%. Thank God, I always feel like they have our back. Where I become frustrated and what I think has emerged from my relationships with law enforcement and elected officials is that our laws are inadequate to address what's happening. And, we're always running behind as a society on the laws to match the evolution of crime or offense or whatever language you want to use. And so it's almost too easy now for a 17-year-old who has no history to come into Teaneck, shoot at Jewish people, go back to Passaic County and be protected by laws. And I think our legal code needs to be revised to be far more stern and far more to adhere to far more consequences for these perpetrators of hate crimes, and especially against the Jewish community, which makes up the largest single percentage by far of faith-based hate crimes.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a point that I want to address. And I'm doing this. This is not out of left field. It's really, in line with kind of the current environment. It's in line with the 17-year-old that you're describing and younger people. And what we saw in the last few weeks, the information coming out that the mayor of New York City's wife was liking posts immediately after October 7th. And I'd love your perspective on call it 10 years before October 7th. And maybe it was 10 to 15 years that really, I think, led to this kind of this view for some reason, or this willingness to accept, or young people fall into this trap of being anti-Israel and anti-Semitic at the same time. And I'm interested if you want to kind of share your views.
So I have two perspectives on this that I'm happy to share. And I think you have two things coming together here that have not helped the Jewish community. One, forget the goals and aspirations of DEI and focus only on the implementations of DEI. That left Jews on the outside looking in, right? We became somehow, in academia and in that world, colonizers and oppressors, not colonize and oppress, which, pardon the expression, has always been asinine to me, considering that we were kicked out of our homeland 2,000 years ago, which is why the rest of us came through Europe. I know you came through Germany. My family came through Poland and Ukraine, right? But ideally, or I shouldn't say ideally, originally, I know your family and mine came from what is now the land of Israel. But somehow we have been labeled in that as the oppressing colonizer. And the other aspect of it that's been horrific for us has been the neglect of anti-Semitism from the left. Everybody is so quick to denounce the right. You know, if it's white nationalists, if it's white extremists, the media and society are all over it. So they've been shunned, right? Like white hate has been treated as this sort of bubonic plague disease that needs to be put into a corner. But when it came from the left, it was always couched as free speech or academic freedom, and it was put more on a pedestal. So when you combine those two factors, it's like a powder keg exploding after, October 7th. But it had been trending that way for quite some time. I used to argue with some of my peers and colleagues at the ADL about the way they would describe certain crimes, right? If it was a white person, it was clearly labeled as such. But if you look at some of the language that some of the outlets were using after what happened in Jersey City, it just basically said two people, right? And it doesn't describe it because heaven forbid. So I think the lack of acknowledgement of anti-Semitism being the same on the left as it is on the right, even if it comes from different places, the end result and impact is anti-Semitism, that they should be called out equally. And that's just my opinion. I haven't done a deep data research into it because I have a full-time job, but.
Yeah, no, I think there's, and I know, I've watched it over 10 plus years, this really educational narrative. And there's this confluence of events which took place. And, but I really think the young people not having clarity of right and wrong, good and bad. Like, I know, how many times have you been to Israel since October 7th?
I would think 8 or 9 times.
And you were probably 5 times in the first 6 months?
My first time on the ground was October 16th, believe it or not. And we weren't allowed to leave the hotel. Everyone had to come to us.
Yeah.
So Hirsch's family came to us, right?
Yeah. Now I know how you've seen, but the idea that like there is anything, and we saw having been in Israel, it's evil. It should not be hard to call out evil. And yet to have seen someone liking posts because there's an idea that this is a resistance to a colonial power, to an occupier, it's just not right. I mean, we've seen the most beautiful children burned,
beheaded,
just the most horrific things. And then there's this, question of what's truth and what's not truth. And we've seen it ourselves. And it's so upsetting and disorienting and crazy. But I think it starts in the schools at a very young age. And it started down this path of idea that, if you're an oppressor, you're bad. And to get rid of the oppressor, you can do anything. And anything in this case included rape, sexual mutilation, stealing children, etc.
It's crazy. I mean, in what world is taking infants and toddlers and juveniles hostage acceptable? And yet people like Mamdani and his wife seem to call it an appropriate reaction. And so to your point, how New York votes this guy in and his wife, it's absolutely crazy to me. It's incredulous, actually.
Well, it's I don't want to get into
But yeah,
to too much of the politics of it, although I think Mamdani is something that's almost above politics because he's so representative in everything he does that he doesn't speak and he doesn't want to speak on global affairs unless it's about Israel. At which point he speaks even on St. Patrick's Day. You saw,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I think everyone saw it. He used his one moment on St. Patrick's Day to talk about genocide in Israel, as opposed to the virtues of Irish values and celebrations. It makes no sense to me, but we're up against, to your point, pure evil, and whether or not it's crossing the internationally recognized border in Israel in the south or in the north and slaughtering families in their homes, it also manifests itself in this speech here in the States.
yeah. And what do you think about, I saw that he had a certain sect of the Jewish community. Did you see that?
I did. So look, all of these anti-Semites always find a small sect of the Jewish community that's not in tow with the other 90% and puts them on a stage and uses them as like the Jewish community is not united on this and there are other perspectives. When in fact, 90% of us would say not like,
Well, so this is a great question. Is what do we? Because it oftentimes feels very lonely being Jewish, whether it's non-Jewish people and people but within the Jewish community, how united are we in our support of each other as Jews and in support of Israel? Do we think it's 90%? Do we think it's 80%? I mean, I've seen various statistics. I'd be interested in
I think it
what you
depends on
think.
on the area we're defining. If
Mhm.
it's us in northern New Jersey, again, I think we're fairly fortunate, and the data and the statistics we have show that general support for Israel is rather high amongst all our constituents.
Yeah.
There's a small minority of people who aren't on the same page. Where we may differ here in New Jersey is based on where you live, your age, your gender, your religious level of observance. You may have different views on how that manifests itself, right? Like whether or not it includes Judea and Samaria or it doesn't. But at the end of the day, everyone acknowledged for the most part that what happened on October 7th and since is completely wrong, that holding Jews who live in northern New Jersey accountable for the actions of the state of Israel is wrong, and that we have freedom of speech ourselves to say we stand with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
We're not chanting genocidal slogans. We're not looking to eliminate other people from the land. So I think there is a lot of unity. I think for a second, if I can now praise you, I think as chair of the Federation board, you've made it your mission to bring the community together. So when you talk about how do we not feel isolated or how do we sort of have a shoulder to cry on amongst ourselves, you've been able to bring us together to do that. Right? That's been one of the goals and objectives. And I think compared to where we were 2 years ago, that's one of the legacies of your chairmanship. It's different.
Thank
now.
you for the
Even
kind
this morning,
words.
I had a meeting this morning with 5 rabbis from the 3 different streams, and it's rather seamless.
Yeah. This is what we've talked about is one community. And, it doesn't matter if you are Orthodox or unaffiliated, whether you're Israeli or American. And I think Laura talked about it on her first podcast, which is the beauty of the event that was the first commemoration of October 7th, having 5,000 of our community together. It is my mission is to bring us all together and have a place. And what I really love about everything you're saying is, for me, like, I'm probably one of these sick people who go on Twitter or X or Instagram, and I like the rage baiting or doom scrolling. I don't even know which one it is, but like, I love getting wound up and angry. And what I really appreciate is your leadership and steadfast thought process here, which is like, actually, Daniel, 80-90% of the Jews in northern New Jersey, which is 125,000 Jews in our area, 609,000 in total, for the vast majority are supportive of each other, supportive of the Jewish community, supportive of Israel and its right to exist, and recognize good and bad. And that's a very good thing. And I agree with those numbers, and I agree with that. But oftentimes we very quickly go to the bad and like, who isn't supporting and why aren't they supporting? So let me ask you this question this way. The statistics and then my data is, roughly, my data is a bit old, but if you look at the age generations and the support for Israel, you can see that to 85%, and this is not just Jewish people, but 85%, 70 years and up, support Israel and its right to exist in the U.S. And then it goes all the way down to 18 to 24, where it's only 55%. Do you think we have a solution or an idea, a path? What should we be doing as Jews and as Jewish leadership to help make sure we have the numbers up in the Jewish community, but beyond the Jewish community? What should we be doing?
It's that's the $100 million question, Daniel. There's a lot of things. There's no one strategy that's going to solve that. And we have to look at a lot of transitional data over the course of over the years. So, I think typically, I don't know the exact statistics off the top of my head, but younger generations have always been far more critical of democracies and capitalist societies over the course of the year. So I'd have to see how much this is really trailing, right? I don't know if today's 18 to 24-year-old, once they're a parent and they have kids, or do they tend to feel the same way as they did 20, 30 years earlier? But I think there's a legitimate threat in that. I think what we have to understand too as Jews, going back to my earlier, stronger statements on the colonizer, oppressor, oppressed model, is that is what we're getting caught up in right now. We're sort of like the test plate for that a little bit. And if that dynamic changes for the better, I think it'll be better for us. In the meantime, the single biggest thing is the greater society has to come back to the middle, right? The social media and the media and the conversations and everything are all focusing on the extremes on both sides. And the middle ground is getting sort of chewed up in all of this. And I think if we have to right size America to start dealing with sort of this question on the Jewish front as well, I don't doubt that there's a certain percentage of people who just hate and resent Jews. Like it is what it is, but it's come out of the woodwork of late and it seems to be growing. So I see different strategies and different reasons for it. And we have to fix our education curriculum and go back to the way that was. We need to pass something like IRA in Trenton and elsewhere that more clearly defines anti-Semitism. There needs to be consequences for people who break the law and do those types of hate crimes or commit those hate crimes. So I think it's a multi-staggered approach that requires a lot of different things. What starts to drive me crazy in today's society is, we're spending as a Jewish system just through federation almost $1 billion now a year on safety and security. That doesn't include the billions coming from the federal and state government. So imagine if we were able to take those resources and flip them into a culture change or different discourse in society that had a different discussion. Could that maybe change it? So I think we're in the midst of a peak in this right now, and I'm kind of hoping that things smooth out.
You think a peak in anti-Semitism, a peak in
civil discourse, anti-Semitism, societal breakdowns?
It's interesting because, I guess I kind of have mixed views about this. I actually feel like we're a heck of a lot better today in the, call it spring of 2026 than we were in 2024, if you think about that, and what happened on college campuses, what kind of was happening across the country. Now, I have mixed emotions because we've dealt with the terrorist attacks and the anti-Semitic attacks, the Jews being beat up in California for speaking Hebrew. It's just insane. So there's really bad stuff, but at the same time, it does feel like there's a lot more reasonableness of thought. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think you're right. What I would say to you, though, is if God forbid something happens again in 5 years of similar size and proportion of devastation, would it not unearth this all over again? So right now, the fact that this report came out on anti-Semitism on campuses yesterday is actually a big thing for the
You want to
Jewish
share
community.
kind of
The Congress issued a report yesterday that basically lambasted foreign influence, academic liberal, I don't want to say liberalism, but progressive ideologies, administrations that are turning the other way is creating hostile campus environments for Jews. And now that that's out and it's being called out as such, it gives us an opportunity to fix it. So I think you're right. We're probably at the back end of the peak, not the middle or the front end at this point. But that genie can pop out of the bottle again is what I'm worried about. So we have to go back and look at K-12 curriculums, which is something we're doing here at Federation. As you know, we have someone on staff focused on trying to fix that, because they can't be teaching in classes that Israel doesn't have a right to exist to 13-year-olds.
I think the K through 12 education is like so important, and school boards and our local politicians are super important, because this is where, I mean, it starts in this education, in miseducation starts. And I think it's really important. I really think it's important that we open up our minds and recognize, like, just because I vote Democrat or just because I vote Republican doesn't mean I should always vote Democrat or always vote Republican. There are incredibly important nuances within those groups, like, that we need to individually prioritize as to what is going on. So, you know, again, I want us all to be together. I don't want us to be defined by, you know, right or left. It doesn't matter. We're Jewish, or even if we're not Jewish, we're people who just want to live in peace, who want to support one another, Jewish, non-Jewish, everybody. And I think there's this historical element where we think, oh, it should be like this, so I'm just going to keep going in this one direction. And that one direction is actually not good for us.
No, but I also think the Jew, and this is like an important point I try to explain to non-Jews with Federation all the time. We're not only about ourselves. We're about the community at large. We often use the word tikkun olam, repair the world. Mm-hmm. I don't really love that expression per se in English. In Hebrew, it sounds much better to me. But it's why we do things with the community at large. We look for partners all the time. In the past 2 years, you and I have met with the Indian Hindu community many times. We've met with the AAPI community. Mm-hmm. We started outreach with the Hispanic Latin community, the Black community, because we're about the entire community rising, not just us. And so I think that's a critical point. Like when you talk about the work that we do, we've invested so much time and resources into working with other groups so that it's on things that are mutual as opposed to what divides us. It's about what benefits us, right?
So like Federation, just for people's benefit, if you said the core things that Jewish federations do, they are?
At this point, it's social welfare, taking care of the community's needs from a social welfare perspective, Jewish continuity, perpetuating the Jewish identity, regardless of how people practice, supporting global Jewry, particularly advocacy and support for Israel and other at-risk communities like Ukraine. But now I would add the fighting anti-Semitism, fighting hate and safety and security has become this whole fourth pillar of work that we do. It's enormous. We spoke about the expense of it. But when we did surveys in 2023, coming out of COVID before October 7th, it was the number one thing on people's minds. Yeah. And that had changed from 2013, where it was second or third. So you're talking about a 15-point swing in how people were viewing it. And one of the things I like about Federation and my job is the flexibility that we have to meet needs as they change. And you have been a part of this for many years. You've been an officer for many years, and you've been in influential positions for many years, and you get to work with your peers and with our staff in doing that.
Well, and we talk about one community, and I guess I am plugging Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey, who's a sponsor of this podcast. But what I love about our Jewish community is it's not Jewish Federation is the anchor organization and partner to the JCCs, to the synagogues, to the Jewish day schools, to your local food pantries. I mean, this is what we do. And then supporting Israel and other areas that need us when they need us. And this is collaborating and convening is so important. And it's something that makes me so proud to be part of Jewish Federation, is that we work arm in arm with each one of those. And to your point, we can pivot to where is needed and direct the community's attention that way. And security, I think, is a huge piece right now for our various agencies. And, obviously supporting Israel has been a huge piece, and combating anti-Semitism is essential.
Yeah. And if you go back 5 years, think about what we did during COVID and coming out of COVID, right? We were dealing with trauma, mental health, things about isolation, social welfare and needs, feeding people. It was rather remarkable, pivot every couple of years here. I'm looking forward to a time of stability where we can be hyper-focused on just building Jewish community and whatnot. But
I mean, this is where it comes back to why I want us all together, united as a community around the things we care about, which is effectively helping each other and lift each other up and making sure we're protecting the most vulnerable, and then combating anti-Semitism, because again, it's a real question. And I don't think you can say it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, because it's certainly not the best of times. And it certainly feels like it could be a lot closer to the worst of times. But there are glimmers of light in this kind of dark period. And I think it really is your leadership that is helping bring us through this challenging period. And you're bringing in the key communal leaders, whether they're professionals or lay people. So tell us about how you see, the balance between all of these factors, whether it's the food insecurity, whether it's the combating anti-Semitism, security, Israel. How do you balance that as we sit here?
I do most of them all day, and I just go from one to the other relatively seamlessly. The story I've been telling people of late is for the first 10 years in my job, when I was sitting down with a donor or someone in the community and I was talking about things, I would talk about nutrition an awful lot. Mm-hmm. What I'm finding today is when I sit down and I talk to someone, they're like, yeah. You'll get my money for the nutrition stuff. I want to talk about what's going on in Trenton or DC or specifically safety and security. So I would say the balance of my time has shifted quite a bit in my job. And I've gone from, say, 10% government, civic relations, security. Now it's probably more than 50% of my day. If you think about how often you and I are texting during the day, the topics are almost always about, the safety, security, anti-Semitism, and hate agenda.
Yeah.
Even though we just did something pretty significant for the seniors in our community, that was, again, a 3-text thread where some of the other stuff can go on forever.
The more to come there. It's the work,
I'm just teasing it.
The work Jason's doing, it is remarkable. I mean, so do you think, to this question, do you think that versus you're in your, let's call it your 14th year here? 15th year. Do you feel like you have more or less explaining as to what Federation does today? You think people know what Jewish Federation does today in their community more than they did 10 years ago?
So I think the people I work with, yes, but you mentioned 125,000 Jews. It's impossible for me to touch 125,000 Jews. So I touch a lot of the leaders, like professional leaders. I touch a lot of the major philanthropists in the community and things like that. And I think for sure we've gotten further into that. But with COVID, with what's going on in the city, we have a lot of younger people coming in, and I think things have started to change. And so to explain federation in the community, we're changing ways in which we approach and communicate with the community. This podcast, right? The whole Jews for NJ concept, which was a brilliant rollout of trying to get people to connect to the Jewish community without them feeling like it was just about fundraising or a specific entity, but rather being together, has been a way of effectively helping people navigate and connect with the Jewish community. At this point, too, because I've been here for so long and I know so many of the elected officials, they're much more familiar with it. But yesterday, for example, I had my initial meeting with the new mayor in Hoboken, Emily Jabbour, and I did have to, sort of roll back and explain, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and by the way, we want to be your partner, right? If you're doing something civically engaging in Hoboken, so you have a day of good deeds, Good Deeds Day or something, Federation wants to be a partner with you in that. If it's delivering meals, if it's a volunteer day, think of us as your partner. But for the most part, I think that Federation has certainly changed its trajectory in this community, and a lot more people understand it. But most people connect to what they're specifically interested in.
Which is great. And I also love that, that's kind of what we do at Federation, is help connect them to what their specific area of need or focus. And I love, the approach. I can think of one of our largest partner organizations. Our job is to help lift them up. And there's no, there is this arm lock unity of, we are here to lift up every Jewish organization. And whether that means us funding them, whether it means us helping them raise more funds, whether it helps with, it's helping them with their security, whether it's helping them with their programming, that's what Federation does. What gets you most excited? What do you, because you're not, you're a very stable person. I'm a very excitable person. What gets you the most excited?
I get, on the positive side.
Yes. Only positive.
No. When I see kids coming back from a Jewish camp experience, when I see kids who come back from a trip to Israel, when I see a senior getting a meal who just says thank you to me, I love that stuff. That's the really good stuff. When people stop me on the street and thank me, I had some sort of miracle worker way of doing it, when I know it's a community behind us, I absolutely love it. When this guy in the gym stops me and simply says that thank you, what you did was great, I read about it, that stuff pumps me up and gets me going, right? As long as I'm dealing in something positive, if the impact is there, if I see something good happen because of our work, I'm pretty pumped up and jazzed about it. When we were in Israel in November and we went into those bomb shelters that we helped renovate and fix up and build in Nahariya, I got to tell you, there was a part of me that was I wanted to sort of just pump my chest and say, yeah, we did it. That got me jazzed up.
Let's
not why we had to do it, but we did. We pulled it off.
And we should talk about this. I'm sure we will at the board meeting next week. So we funded the building of bomb shelters in schools and other places, but we were specifically in a school, and that allows kids in the very northern part of Israel, about 5 kilometers at the nearest point.
Yeah, at the nearest point
from the Lebanon border, to be able to go to school and be able to get quick enough into a bomb shelter. And we need that right now during the Iran war and what's going on with Lebanon shooting the missiles across. And we know in Nahariya, they were hit. And just a few days ago, a number of people were injured. Yeah. A number of people, thank God, everyone's, I believe, okay.
Yeah, there were some minor injuries from a direct hit. But those are the things that excite me. Yeah, I've had a couple of philanthropic wins in the last couple of years, so that also excites me, because then I feel like I'm not doing this work alone. It's not just me and staff plowing through it. It means that there are people who are legitimately trusting us and investing in us. That gets me really excited about the work.
I mean, I would just point out, I think it's like the fact that we've grown to well over $100 million in endowment and directed funds under your leadership is incredible. And frankly, I think we're on our way to 200 million and 400 million and
It's
well
a force
beyond. And
multiplier.
that is a lifelong gift to the community because that money earns returns, and then we distribute from that to support the community year in and year out. It's huge having those philanthropic wins.
It is. Look, I'll tell you, there are times where I have like difficult days like anyone else on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And to sort of right set myself, I think about the things we've accomplished since I've been here. And it just gives me a little bit of ease because I know like nothing in life is seamless. It's not like,
See,
I think you're a successful guy. And
well, thank you. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, not every day can be a win. But when I look at some of the things we've done and accomplished, I think, look, every year we spend over $1 million on senior nutrition out of our campaign. And I think it's 100-something thousand meals a day. It got up to like 120 in the COVID years. It's multiply that by 15. That's how many meals. That's how many times we've fed people.
Yeah. It's a remarkable. But I always think, and this is in my exit interview. That is me leaving as the chair. But
you're not going anywhere.
Always think you're not one. It's like the Hotel California.
I'm telling you, Daniel's not going anywhere.
It's the Hotel California. Once you check in,
you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Exactly, it's no problem. But no, what I was going to say is, you're the ultimate down player. Like the reality of the engagement that has taken place across the community over the last 15 years of your leadership and the growth. And you mentioned the influx of younger people and our ability to engage younger people, whether it's Jews for NJ and making Hamantaschens, whether it's I think there's going to be a tremendous women's luncheon this year and having world-class speakers. The engagement level and enthusiasm has been tremendous. And it is infectious beyond just Jewish Federation. It helps every one of our organizations in our area and beyond. And so I want to thank you. I want to end, though, on one question, which I like to try to focus people on, is people are listening or watching. What can individuals do to have an impact? And we really want to see how can they get involved or not get involved, but have some impact, do something.
So, of course, like the easiest thing to do is to contribute and be philanthropic and give back. If you have the capacity to do it, there's no substitute for putting fuel into the engine and the resources into the engine. But the other thing I would say to people is, depending on what your interest is, you should reach out to us because we have a lot of different opportunities where an individual can get involved in a committee or a process that they would feel good about and they can make happen. I have a good friend who's here today. I've known her and her family for over 20 years. She actually grew up with my sister. That's how I know her. And they've always been Jewish, but they haven't actively participated. And now they're getting involved in our Jewish Volunteer Center. And she came here today to help support, sort out food and clothing for people who need it. And so there's that. We have someone in the community that was really big on advocacy. She was an attorney. Her husband owns a business, and they were looking for something to do because they were going out of their mind about what happens. And we were able to get them involved in our advocacy arm. So it's time, it's resources. People can do it. There's no shortage. And between our agencies, our synagogues, our day schools, the JCCs, I like to think of Jewish Federation, to your point, like it's not just federation, it's the community. So if you look at the Jewish community and its strength, there's plenty of room for people to join that army.
So we touch 100 different organizations. Is that right?
At least. Yeah.
So let's say, and how many, like I think we should have this number. How many people do you think we touch through our various organizations? It's got to be something like 35,000.
Oh, it's more than that. If you're talking about 125,000 Jews, if you include there's 6,500 kids in day school on any given day. The JCC has 16 to 20,000 unduplicated people going through its doors. You're talking about 100 synagogues. Do the math on whatever.
Right.
You want to say 300 members, and you start, even if you start to dedupe it, you're getting into significant numbers. So I would say, if I had to ballpark it, out of the 125,000 people we have, I would say at least half of them do something Jewish along the year, and probably even higher than that if you really think about it.
This is great. I really appreciate you taking the time out of all of the work that you're doing to sit down and talk. I'm sure we'll be doing it again. I would say if you want to make an impact, do everything Jason said and like and subscribe to this podcast so you can stay up to date. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was an honor and privilege to be here, and thank you for your leadership.